Let's go, everyone. Welcome back. It's the WebCast and your host, Mike Wobschall, known by many of you as Wobby. We have returned, cracking the mic once again to talk the NFL and Vikings football with all of you. Very excited to do it. As you know, after 15 seasons with the team and I parted ways, but I didn't go away. I followed the team. I chased the team. I'm a fan of the team just like you guys are. And we've been nudged. We've been encouraged. We've had the itch to get back on air. And here we are. We're back on air. It's the WebCast. It's the WebCast remixed or reloaded or 2.0. It's the real WebCast, whatever you want to call it. It's the WebCast and it's Vikings football. And we're all here to do it together. And we're looking forward to it. Now, who is the we in this equation? Well, we've got a team working to bring you guys some of the best football content that you can find in the podcasting universe. And my team members here, I'm going to introduce them right now. We have on-air partner, we have producer Giles Uhlenhop, who Giles and I worked together in one of my previous stops after the Vikings. And we talked Vikings like every single day. I think we talked more Vikings than we did marketing, and we were at a marketing agency. We also have an executive producer, Chase Conrady. He's going to be along, and he's going to make sure Giles and I stay in between the guardrails, and he's going to make things sound good. He's going to make things look good, but it's all going to come together and be one smooth operation when all is said and done. And our purpose is to bring you, like we said, great Vikings and NFL content every single week. We're going to give you 30 to 60 minutes every Monday as we preview the upcoming game. We look back on what happened last week. In the offseason, we'll preview the draft or the combine or free agency or coaching changes. Anything that's on your mind, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to do it every Monday. We might even throw a bonus podcast in on a Friday or a breaking news podcast on a Wednesday if you're wondering who's in and who's out in the upcoming matchup. We are going to be your one-stop source for NFL and Vikings information on the internet and wherever you can find podcasts. So let me bring in my partners right now. It's Giles and it's Chase. Hey, fellas, thanks for being along for the ride. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise. Glad to be here. Yeah, I can neither confirm or deny that you and I did talk a lot of Vikings football, more than work. Yeah, it was definitely a good time. But ultimately, I think we solved most of the problems that the Vikings are having.
We did. Yep.
I think everything's solved. We're just here to chase a championship, and no pun intended. We brought Chase along to help us chase, and we got some good things coming. Just the formula to win a Super Bowl. I think the Vikings are headed down the right path.
Chase, you up for this challenge? I mean,
oh yeah,
this is a tall task in front of you now.
Mm-hmm. No, super excited. Honestly, I'm most excited for just getting to be closer with my fellow Vikings fans in the community, and just kind of having more contact with them, and really sharing my opinions, because I know how to fix the team. But
yeah, we all do. We all have the answers. Right? We all have the answers. And look, like you guys hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was with the team for 15 years, and I always said, aside from traveling and going to games home and away, my favorite part of the job for those 15 years was the interaction and the idea exchange with fans, with fellow men and women who had a passion for the purple, loved the game of football, and just wanted to exchange ideas, wanted the team to win and wanted the team to succeed. And that's really what we're going to be all about here. Is we're going to be not myopically focused on the Vikings, not exclusively focused on the Vikings, but we are going to be heavily focused on the Vikings. But we'll keep our blinders off, and we'll keep an eye on everything else going around in the NFC North and the NFL as well. But as mentioned, I'm not with the team anymore. We still have some connections with the team that we can use to help us stay informed and bring you some of the best content. But we've got 15 years of experience of being inside the ropes, of knowing the ins and outs of the organization and the league and how it works. And we have a network of people that we can reach out to that can be involved in this. And it's really going to help us bring all of you guys some great content. So as mentioned, I've been nudged to do this for a while. And why I'm doing it right now is because I can't take my eye off of it. I love it. I've loved it since I was a kid. I grew up in a small town in South Central Minnesota, bled purple, loved the NFL. And even though I'm not inside the ropes anymore, this just in, I still have opinions, right? And don't we all? So this is the place where we can exercise those opinions. And this is the place where we're going to intake some opinions as well. And we're going to get into how all of you can do that, the ways you can find us and the ways you can reach out to us and be involved in the show and join the conversation, whether it be via email, whether it be maybe leaving us a voicemail that we play on a show. We are going to encourage that, and we want that from all of you. So you're going to get great information. You're going to get lots of opinions. We're going to have fan interaction. We're going to have gambling angles and fantasy football implications and all sorts of stuff that you can come to us for, and you'll be entertained, and hopefully you'll be enlightened when all is said and done as well. So with that said, I think we've sort of laid the groundwork for what we want to do here, not just here in episode 1, which is a reintroduction of the WobCast, but what we want to do with the WobCast going forward. I think, Giles, I know the season is upon us here, but I think it behooves us maybe to start a little high level with what transpired in the front office at TCO Performance Center this offseason, and maybe provide some opinions and some insight into what we think is happening at the helm of the organization with the GM and the head coach, because we saw some changes there.
Yeah, honestly, change is not always a great thing, but I think in this context, I think this might be a positive direction for the team. I was one of the bigger Mike Zimmer fans. Honestly, he built some great regimes, some of the best defenses in NFL history. But with that being said, sometimes change is needed. And I would say, the change in the NFL as a whole from a macro level, the league is really headed in a different direction. It's very offensively focused. It's a very positive, locker room happy type culture. And I think ultimately that's what the Vikings ended up going towards. But with that being said, all personalities aside, I'm really excited for what the Vikings are really bringing to the table, because you could make an argument that the Vikings have one of the best skilled position units in the NFL. And sure. I think the Vikings organization has really built and brought in a coaching staff that is really meant to maximize that entire team. And I think that's the real message across this entire offseason, is that they're looking to maximize. As a fan base and as an organization, I think we're both focused on really chasing that championship, like I mentioned before, and really maximizing those things has really been everything they've done this offseason when it comes to the GM and the coach. I think ultimately, when you think about maximizing a team, the new coaching scheme came from the Rams, and they maximized that team. They took people that had never gotten even close to that level, and they came home with a ring. So I think the fact that we have a Super Bowl winning head coach, I think there's some really interesting things there. How about you?
Yeah, I think, I want to hit the GM change and the head coaching change separately. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do want to separate them. They do work hand in hand, and their synergy is important. So I don't want to put them in silos forever, but in analyzing what happened and what we expect, let's put them in silos just for now. And let's start at the top with the GM, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who, it's not just a change from Spielman to him. It's a change in philosophy and background. I mean, there basically are no similarities between how Rick came up and how Kwesi came up, and just go and read about it on the team's website or on Wikipedia or on any of the articles that were written when he was hired. I mean, this is a guy.
It's Moneyball time.
Yeah. I mean, he was trading commodities at a time, right. And so he's come up a different way. And I don't think that a stark difference, I don't think is good by definition or bad by definition. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Absolutely. So it's non-traditional for certain. This is a non-traditional route that the Wolves have gone with the GM. Again, that doesn't mean good or bad by definition, but so often this is what happens in the NFL with changes at the top of an organization, whether it's head coach or GM. You got an offensive-minded head coach that you fired. More times than not, the owners are hiring a defensive-minded head coach, and you get an old school, traditional, molded GM that you move on from. It's not a surprise that you're going, as you termed it, Giles, Moneyball. And I don't know if Kwesi would embrace that term or not, but I think, for lack of a better term, that's really the identity of it. So I think we'll see a methodical transformation of the front office, Giles, where stalwarts will give way to startups. There are going to be some longtime members of that front office who are either going to be forced to change and look at things differently, or who will move on to different teams or different roles. And Kwesi will bring in some of his own style of guys. That change will be methodical. I don't want to call it slow, because some of it has already happened, but it's intentional and methodical.
Yep.
So I think you're going to see that, and a lot of it I think will be data driven and analytics driven.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's important to provide some props to the Wilfs and the whole Vikings organization, because there was obviously a number of candidates that could have taken that role, and they explored a lot of those options. Take a look at Ryan Poles, who ended up going with the Bears. Now he took a very different approach with the Bears. He essentially tore the entire thing down, right? They're going back to the bones, and they're going to rebuild from the ground up. And I think with Kwesi, I'm really intrigued by his direction, what he calls the competitive rebuild. And honestly, when you look at the talent on this roster, move all past wins or losses aside from the previous years, we have a really talented roster. If you go to each of the position groups across the team on both offense and defense, you're going to find a Pro Bowler at every position. We were not maximizing every position. So I think Kwesi is really put in a really intriguing perspective when he said the competitive rebuild, because ultimately we can win now, in my opinion. I actually think if you provide the right coaching, you provide the right health component, we have a shot at the Super Bowl. With that being said, you can't always look at right now. So the fact that he's trying to balance both today and tomorrow without completely throwing the entire kitchen out with the bathwater, so to speak, this year, I think that's a really intriguing approach.
Yep. I agree with all that. And we're going to get into what you just mentioned, Giles, about the Vikings and their prospects for where their place will be in the NFC, in the conference, where that is. We're going to get into that next week in episode 2 of the WebCast, and where, what the topography is of the NFC. We'll get into that because I think despite these 2 significant changes, I think we can carve out an avenue or a path where the Vikings can actually be there at the end to compete, which is not common for teams that absorb this much change. The last note that I have on Kwesi is more so than like with Spielman and his regime, they liked this out of interior guys. They like this out of corners. More than that, I'm looking forward to salary allocation by position. And if there's going to be a philosophical change there, because there are some things that I think the team did during Rick's time where it was like they drafted someone and it turned out to be a really good draft pick. But it wasn't like a premium position. It might have been a position that you could go find another guy in. But it's like, no, we hit on this guy. And so we're going to like validate that by giving him another contract. Okay. And controversially, I'm going to point out Dalvin Cook as that guy. And I can't wait to see, once Kwesi has the ability to make a big decision on Dalvin, what that decision is. Don't you think you can argue that running backs, you can find them anywhere base? I think we all agree Dalvin is a special player. Maybe he's the best. Maybe he's the best in the NFL or second. I don't know.
At certain elements, he is definitely the best.
Right. But I guarantee you there are people in the NFL running teams who would say, I don't care if another Barry Sanders came along, we're not giving him $15 million a year because of the position he plays. So that is, I think, going to be a huge change. From the general manager transition that happened. So
100%, especially as you layer on the scheme fit that has been set up for by both the coach and the general manager, where not only the schemes of how they're running the offense and defense, but also the attributes that are required for that. Obviously, they have drafted for tremendous speed and tremendous intelligence. They're trying to win through that. And I think when you draft guys appropriately with those attributes, I think that gives you a little bit of leniency to be able to not pursue people like Dalvin Cook. Now, I think this year is going to be explosive. I don't think anyone can argue with that. But as the team moves forward into subsequent years, honestly, with this scheme, when you look at Mike Shanahan's kind of umbrella across the league, you can find guys at running back. Their system produces great running backs. Now, I'm excited to see what a great running back does in this scheme. But with that being said, when you have to allocate salary cap, it's a salary cap league. There are other positions that I think you're going to need to devote towards that, especially as you move into a season where Irv Smith Jr. is going to need to get paid next season. Justin Jefferson potentially next offseason is going to need to get paid. Unfortunately, I think Alex Madison might be a cap casualty, but the point is there's some people coming due that will need to get paid, and you're going to need to make decisions on where you're going to pull that money from.
And I just, as much as I can argue, Giles, that, maybe you shouldn't part ways with Rick Spielman, there are some things I can point to that would make that case. One thing that I do wonder if it hampered the club was what I mentioned, like, let's validate this pick that we made and give him another contract, and it's like, you're right, he's a good player. You're right. That was a great pick, but I don't think you should give him that much money, and so I think we are going to see a shift in that. And I think that's going to be like away from running backs, away from linebackers, away from safeties. And I think it's going to go 2 guys on the edge, the tackles, the ends, or the outside linebackers. I think it's going to go to receivers. Okay. Because you got an offensive minded head coach. So I'm excited to see that. And then the next level of that, Giles, is, okay, I know your philosophy is you're not going to pay running backs or middle linebackers, but then you draft Luke Kuechly. Are you really going to let him walk out the door? Because that takes a little bit of guile to do that. To let a really good player like that leave, because you're going to get heat for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right
both
away,
internally and externally.
Right. You're going to get heat for that. So we'll see if Kwesi can do that, and we'll see what that's going to look like. All right. The head coach. My gut, Giles, is, and I'm with you, I was a big Zimmer fan too. Mike and I are, we still stay in touch. I love the guy. He was awesome. I thought what he did when he took this job and the progress he made and how fast he made it and where he brought the club was just so impressive. I thought he was a Viking through and through. I thought he was exactly what the team needed. So I'm bummed that he's gone, and I don't think I would have made the change. They did make the change. Offensive minded head coach. My gut feeling though is that Kevin O'Connell knows what he's doing. So I've got confidence in him and what his vision is. And I say that, I want to temper that a little bit because I'm not inside the building. Right. So it's just my gut, and it's unusual for me to have that opinion because O'Connell's makeup, like his profile, is one that would suggest to me ordinarily that he'll disappoint. And the reason is, it's like, I'm not comparing Bill Belichick and Sean McVay in terms of like accomplishment or credentials, but the Bill Belichick coaching tree is not exactly the Bill Walsh coaching tree, right?
Not at all.
It's not. And I think a big reason for that is these assistant coaches are riding the coattails of Bill Belichick's success. And I just don't know if they were really doing like Bill Belichick was the genius there. Well, he was doing
the guy.
Yeah. He wasn't doing all the foot soldier work, but like the thinking and the philosophy was Belichick's. Plus they had Tom Brady.
That helps.
So you got all these guys coming off the Belichick tree and it doesn't work out for them. And so I'm thinking like Sean McVay is like that. Like he's the philosophy guy. And so Kevin O'Connell, like he's never called a play, right? I don't think he's ever called a play. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
So that would lead me ordinarily to be like, I'm not going to buy it. I think he's going to flop. He's not Sean McVay. But my gut is that O'Connell, and this is just me looking at his demeanor, listening to him, talking to some people who I know who know him. My gut is that he kind of knows what he's doing. I think he's wide-eyed. I think he's got his own spin-off ideas from McVay. And I think he's inheriting a great amount of talent, which you've already alluded to, Giles. I think the roster is really good. The key to me, and I'll let you chime in after this, the key to me on O'Connell is for him to realize that he has Kirk Cousins operating this offense, not Matthew Stafford. And it's good and bad. Like Kirk Cousins is not going to jump out of his skin and do something unbelievable to rise the level of play around him. Okay. Like the throw that Matthew Stafford made in the divisional playoff game against Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay to Cooper Kupp down the middle of the field took some guts. And I don't know that Cousins would make that throw. Okay. With that being said, there's a game like in the Rams I think they were at home playing the Titans like week 9 last year. And Matthew Stafford threw interceptions on back-to-back plays. The second one was a pick 6 by Kevin Byard, and they lost to the Titans 28-16. And Stafford looked just terrible. He threw crippling interceptions. Cousins isn't going to do that either. Okay. So you need O'Connell though to realize that and to run this offense and call plays knowing he doesn't have Stafford's mentality. He's got Cousins' mentality in there.
Yeah, 100%.
If he can realize that, then I think he can coach around it.
Yep.
And I think he can have this offense humming.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that gives me excitement about this team, honestly, started when the interview process started. And there was rumblings across the league that this guy was the next McVay, and more specifically the tall McVay. And I remember kind of being taken aback by that. Like, what does that mean? And after hearing a bunch of comments about him and the way that he handles things, one, I think he's an intelligent Super Bowl, mind. Essentially, he may not have necessarily called plays, but he knows what it takes to win. And more importantly, if you're going to follow in McVay's footsteps, I think one of the most important things that McVay brings to the table is that he builds his offense and builds his team to his players, not necessarily saying this is what I hope for. He works with what he got. And honestly, there are a lot of different elements that are different between Stafford and Cousins. But ultimately, I view Cousins a lot like, I'm probably going to get heat for this, but more like a Navy SEAL or something where they are elite when given direction. You tell them what to do. They're a great operator. They will do exactly what you ask them to do to the nth degree. It's when you get into that fray category, that's where things go awry. So if you can leverage O'Connell to really give him as many of the pieces of that pie, so to speak, beforehand, I think that's when there's going to be some really good elements. When you give him a good offensive line, and I think it was widely publicized earlier this offseason that Kirk Cousins was doing a progression and he gave up on his first read and went to his second read. And O'Connell was like, hey, I want you to throw the ball in that first read. And Cousins was like surprised by that. He's like, oh, I would have never thrown that ball 10 times out of 10. I'm not throwing that ball. So I think giving Cousins that feedback from O'Connell, I think you're going to see a different Cousins simply because he's being instructed to. I don't want to call him a robot, but I think he's never even thought about those things before. And I do truly believe Cousins is a person that does receive feedback. He just does exactly what you ask him to do. So I think if we can rely on O'Connell, I think we can potentially expect another level to Cousins if that is the case. Yeah, interesting.
Last 2 points on O'Connell. I'm excited to see his philosophy on 4th downs and 2-point conversions and all that stuff. I'm excited to see that.
Yep.
And because that's just a part of the game that I love paying attention to, and I think it's just so pivotal in the outcomes of wins and losses in games. Also, last point here, and this is not a cynical or an optimistic viewpoint. It's just an observation and prediction. O'Connell will lose to Kwesi when push comes to shove and adversity strikes and who's going to go and who's going to stay. O'Connell will lose. So, in my opinion, and that's conjecture. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. And I think he's going to know that, so when it gets a little hairy in the middle of a season, or it's just something to watch, Kwesi is staying.
Yep.
Just my viewpoint on the changes that have happened in the organization and the nature of them. And so I think that hierarchy is very clear.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important to remember that adversity will hit. Even if this team wins the Super Bowl this year, which I will always say that they'll be on the track for that. But even if they do, there's going to be a time in the season where things aren't going to click. I mean, even for the Rams last year, they went an entire month without a win. And people were wondering, are they good? And they ended up winning a ring, right? So obviously there's a lot of different paths to the bowl and paths to a ring, but adversity will hit. And it'll be interesting to see how the team handles that adversity. Because I think top to bottom, they have emitted a very positive tone, a very optimistic tone, a tone of collaboration. And I think that is where the rubber will meet the road. Honestly, they keep on saying that word, and we'll see if that actually becomes the case when that adversity hits.
Exactly right. All right, let's get into the 2022 season and what we expect. and just looking at it from a high level, I think the team will be a high scoring offense. I think you look at their game by game log at the end of the season, you're going to see lots of 27s and 28s and 34s and 31s and 30s. That's what I think you're in for as a Vikings fan this season. And then I think on defense, you're going to feel that the defense is better this year than it was last year. You're going to feel and sense an improved group, but I think there's going to be some feast and famine to it. And I think that will fluctuate. And it's a lot of it. Like I think back to the prime of Aaron Rodgers' career, Giles. Green Bay's defense has been this way, feast and famine. It's like they're playing with a quarterback who scores almost 30 points a game. You can play a certain way knowing that you've got that going on. So, and usually the way that turns out is you give up a lot of yards and you take the ball away a lot because you're jumping routes and you're looking at a lot of passes because you're ahead a lot. So the other team is throwing it a lot. So you're giving up completions, you're giving up yards, but you're taking the ball away a lot. And that's what I think this defense will do, assuming Cousins stays healthy and O'Connell gets it clicking on all cylinders.
100%. And I honestly think there might even be some similarity to the 2022 offense to the 2018 offense. Now, some people are going to say, oh my gosh, I don't want that. A lot of people have some harsh words to say about the offensive coordinator at that time. But I think it's important to emphasize the seasons within the season of 2018, where like I would say the first 6 to 8 games, the offense was actually clicking pretty well. I mean, if everyone remembers, Thielen had, I believe, 8 or 9 games in a row with 100 yards or more. They were clicking very, very well. However, the defense wasn't doing very well. And I think that's where it's important to really emphasize the pairing of offense and defense, because the identity going into the 2018 season was that we were the number one defense. We were shut down. And all of a sudden the offense started scoring a lot of points, which based on the tempo of that offense, our defense started to suffer because we didn't pair them well together. And then we made some offensive changes to help out the defense. And then the whole train kind of fell apart. Now, that's not necessarily meant to like point the fingers at anyone, but I think a lot of people look at the 2018 team as like, oh, they were trash. They were just horrible. There was actually a lot of great elements to that, but we didn't know how to pair them together. So honestly, I think you're going to see a much better pairing between offense and defense and making sure that those two emphasize and accentuate each other, which I'm really, really excited to see.
Yep. Well stated. I think bottom line, I'm expecting a 2-1 start. I think
any predictions on what that'll be?
Well, I think hosting Green Bay and then being at Philly that's tough.
Very tough.
I'm not sleeping on the Eagles this year. I do not think that's in like you walk into Philly and win that game.
No, they have a top 3 roster.
Yep. Yeah.
Arguably.
So I like Philly. I'm blanking on week 3, but I had that as a win.
That's the Saints in London, I believe.
I thought that was 4. Let me pull this up. What do we got for Vikings schedule? 3 is Detroit at home, and then they're in London, week 4.
Okay.
So
I do think we win against the Lions, but I think a lot of people are sleeping on them on the same vein. I think they are going to be better than people expect, but we're still going to win.
So I got 2-1 after 3 games. Again, we're talking expectations here for 2022 for the Vikings. High scoring offense, improved defense. I think special teams will be like a non-talker for once in a long time. Yeah. So 2-1 after 3. After 9, Giles, I think they're 7-2. I think that's going to be a 5-1 stretch in 6 games after the Detroit. That's New Orleans and London, Chicago at home, at Miami, bye, Arizona at home, at Washington. So after all that, they're 7-2 after 9 games. Then I think closing the season, they're 2-1 or 3-0 to close the season. The last 3 games are home to the Giants, at Green Bay, at Chicago. They're 2-1 or 3-0 there. Okay, so that's going to get you to 9 or 10 wins, and it leaves a stretch of games that begins at Buffalo. Then it's 3 at home, Dallas, New England, and the Jets, at Detroit, and versus Indy. That middle stretch right there will determine the outcome of the season. And if they're 500 there, or even one game underneath it, they're in the playoffs and they might win the division. That's how strong I think the Vikings can be in their first 9 games. Ultimately, I see the Vikings and Packers, Giles, finishing with the same record, and their head-to-head matchups determining who wins the division. Ooh. And I think that the NFC is relatively weak. The Vikings will make the playoffs, and they will win a playoff game unless they are matched up with Green Bay in the first round. Then I think they'll be out in the first round. So
I would agree.
That's how I sort of have it laid out. 2-1 after 3, 7-2 after 9, closing strong, winning the division or earning a wild card, and then winning a playoff game, with the caveat being, I don't think they'll beat Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs.
That's fair. And I especially agree with your first part of the prediction, because I think people are forgetting that there's no script on Kevin O'Connell right now. You have no idea what he's going to do. I think they've intentionally been fairly vanilla in the preseason, not revealing many looks. Obviously, you're going to get some flavor of the Rams offense, maybe some flavors back in the day from the Washington football team. There's some elements there that people can pull from, but no one really knows how they're going to be used. I do think they're going to use Dalvin Cook out wide a lot, but the point is there's 0 on the books for them. So I think they're going to use that to their advantage. Based on preseason and training camp, JJ looks hot. Like there's a special connection between Cousins and JJ. And I think they're going to come off firing on all cylinders. With that being said, I think once they hit that kind of 7-9 stretch, I think there will be, obviously there'll be a little more tape on them, and I think they'll start to slow down, especially when they hit the Buffalo Bills. You can make an argument that the Buffalo Bills are favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. Yep. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a rematch come Super Bowl between the Vikes and the Bills. Hot take maybe. But ultimately, I think you're right. I will say, outside of the NFC, I do think that NFC North rather, I do think the NFC in general is fairly weak when you contrast it to AFC. Especially there's some rumblings around the Buccaneers. So you remove the Buccaneers from that equation, their offensive line got destroyed. There's not a ton of players in the NFC, so I think that opens it wide up for the Vikings.
Yep, I totally agree with that. And we will do a full preview of the NFC as a conference in episode 2 of the WobCast. So for those folks who want to get into a conference-wide discussion and take a listen to what we're thinking and feeling, make sure you tune into episode 2 of the WobCast. Speaking of episode 2, it's going to be the Kirk Cousins experience. That is the main topic for the next episode of the WobCast. The Kirk Cousins experience. Where do you sit or stand on Kirk Cousins? Giles, Chase, and I will discuss that. We will welcome in a guest for that discussion. I'm not going to tell you if he's going to be on the pro Cousins side or the against Cousins side of that fence. You're going to have to tune in to find out who the guest is and what he has to say about it. But I promise you his opinions are strong and you'll find them interesting. So we encourage you to subscribe to the WobCast and tune in for episode 2 of the WobCast as we break down the NFC and the Kirk Cousins experience. We also encourage you to reach out to us and engage with us. Send us a question or share an opinion or a comment with us. You can do that all sorts of different ways. The primary way is going to be on Twitter, where you can find us. You can find me at Wobby on Twitter. Send me a note, send me a question. I think we should also get a WobCast email address going so folks can email us. We want to find ways to get all of you involved. So we'll continue to work on that. Again, you can find the WobCast on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter and on Facebook. Giles and I and Chase will do our best to engage with all of you. And again, subscribe to the WobCast, please. You can find the WobCast where you find all of your favorite podcasts. There's all sorts of different places for that. There's Apple Podcasts, there's Spotify, there's Google Play. All those places are where you can find us talking Vikings and talking NFL. Do we leave anything out, Chase or Giles?
No, just Skull Vikings.
Good. Skull Vikings, thank you for listening to the WobCast. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to crack the mic and talk football with all of you guys again. On behalf of Chase and Giles, I'm Wobby, signing off for now. We'll see you next time.